If you're a Kenyan judge watching this, you should be terrified. And you should probably go ahead and stop whatever illegal financial side hustle that you're doing right now. At least for the next 20 minutes. So, let's cut straight to the chase. South Africa's entire justice system is currently on trial. And I don't mean a polite little parliamentary review with tiny sandwiches and a promise to do better. No. It's a full-blown televised grab your popcorn and a lawyer public kind of inquiry. And if you didn't know it, it's the Madlanga Commission. And if you haven't heard about it, guess what? I'm sure your corrupt friends definitely have. Because this thing is quickly becoming the most compelling and frankly most humiliating real-life drama playing out anywhere on this planet. This isn't some prestige limited series on Netflix about fictional corruption. This is about actual WhatsApp messages. This is real bank records. And this is people in position in power forced to explain why suitcases of cash kept showing up like badly behaved house guests who never got the hint and always keep bringing their awful goddamn children every time they visit. And with every new revelation, there's basically a blaring siren pointed straight at Kenya's judiciary. So if you're a Kenyan judge sipping your tea thinking, that's South Africa, they have a lot of weird problems down there. Listen up. You're about to see exactly how institutional rot starts and why Kenya might just be next. It's not a question of if it's happening. It's a question of how deep the termite infestation goes and how quickly it reaches the foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kenyan Week That Was. I'm your host, DY. Now, the whole glorious sordid mess ignited on 17th September 2025 when Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, a police commissioner, walked into the Madlanga hearing room in Pretoria. This wasn't routine. This was the equivalent of dropping a lit match into a swimming pool of jet fuel. Only this time, the fuel is the state funds and the match is a truth teller. Or how Kenyans would have it, an honest man. Under oath, Mkhwanazi didn't tiptoe around. He laid out the road, how crime intelligence funds were siphoned off to buy influence, how police dockets could disappear on command, like a politician's conscience right before an election. And he described prosecutors getting late-night calls instructing them to slow-walk politically sensitive cases. Not justice delayed. Justice very deliberately murdered. The names were named, numbers were projected on screens, and the encrypted chats, they revealed a level of coordination that would make a cartel boss blush. They were operating a legal drive-through with acquittals as the main course. Yeah, this is South Africa, that rainbow nation that rose from apartheid to draft a beautiful progressive constitution. And if a system with that kind of architecture can fester with this level of rot, then truly, you are not untouchable. You're not special. You're just next in line. So, in Nairobi, the phrase, court orders defied, trended March of 2024. Cabinet secretaries, the very same people meant to uphold the law, were openly, and I mean openly, ignoring injunctions. They weren't making a mistake. They were making a bet that public frustration would fade faster than their own hunger for power. That impunity is not a footnote. It's stage one of the disease that Justice Madlanga is dissecting. You know, the slow, deliberate erosion of judicial authority from the top down. Imagine. And now, slowly we evolve to stage two, the selective prosecution, because Kenya's Director of Public Prosecution will drop a high-profile corruption case and then, surprise, surprise, either refile it if there's months later on of public pressure or never ever seem to think that it actually happened. That's not justice. That's politically choreographed legal tap dance. And stage three, you ask? It's intelligence capture. Now, Some judges clutching to their old Maraga task force report. But we have reforms, they whisper. Yes, you had serious recommendations. Insulating appointments, funding witness protection. And here's the punchline though. Parliament only adopted about 1/3 of them. What of the rest? Conveniently filed away until the 2027 election. That's classic. Acknowledge a fire, draft a plan, then put it into the bottom drawer until everyone forgets. The truth is, Kenya is a country that runs on commissions. We love them. We set up the Akiwumi Commission in the 90s. We set up the TJRC. We even had the Task Force on Judicial Reforms way back in 2009. We form these commissions, we write these reports, they are bound in beautiful leather, and then they are sent to the great government shelf of eternal neglect. And we wonder why the same issues, land, justice, corruption, keep coming back like a recurring rush. They keep putting the wrong cream on. We confuse the act of diagnosing the illness with the act of actually curing it. And that is why we are still here. So let us look at the anatomy of capture. Because we need to be able to understand what actually happens for us to get to where we are, or to identify it at least. So how does the bedrock of democracy collapse? It's like termites, quiet, persistent, devastating. It starts with intimidation. Prosecutors at the Madlanga hearing testified that whenever they insisted on charging the powerful, their reward was not a bonus, it was a transfer to a remote outpost. And in Kenya, judges who ruled against the executive got transfers, or worse still, their security details were withdrawn. That's not random staffing adjustments. That's a threat wearing a cheap bureaucratic suit. Then comes the bribery. Madlanga is exposing the systemic inducements, the luxury cars, the overseas trips, private school fees or tuition, institutionalized customer service for the powerful. The evidence is digital. Forensic investigators cloned phones, retrieved messages, and traced financial transactions linking judicial outcomes to private payments. Those digital fingerprints, they don't lie. They are receipts, or better yet, they're like Edgar or Barry. And a whistleblower handed EACC evidence on tender kickbacks reaching senior judicial staff. What happened? The EACC received the dossier, and then all of a sudden, crickets. 18 months later, nothing. The file evaporated into thick wall of silence, which sadly is Kenya's most profitable export. The Madlanga Commission is doing something radical. It's making evidence public. Once the raw data is out, denial is impossible. You cannot gaslight a country that's literally reading the WhatsApp logs. Transparency, my friends, isn't just a nice PR. It is the cheapest insurance policy. Because you see, rot thrives in darkness. It dies under fluorescent lights and a nosy neighbor or public. Now, let's be brutally honest about the cost. You see, judicial rot is not legal. It's not a legal problem. It's an economic grenade with a short fuse. When investors look at a country, they don't just check the GDP growth and the pretty brochures provided to them. They ask, can contracts be enforced fairly? And if the answer is, well, maybe unless someone powerful is involved, you're probably going to be borrowing costs. Your borrowing costs are just going to shoot up. And because money runs from institutional decay like a cat from a bathtub. Corruption is currently costing Kenya an estimated 608 billion annually. That's not an abstract figure. That is about 7.8% of the entire GDP. Let's put that into terms that you can understand. Because you see, this 608 billion is enough to fully fund almost 7 years of the total annual budget of the judiciary. 7 years. We are celebrating that our forex reserves are stable. And they are currently, because they are about 11 billion and covering about nearly 5 months of imports. But that stability is great, but it's also very fragile. Look at our debt. When the government went to international markets recently, they had to issue a Eurobond with a yield of nearly 10%. Compare that to the stable North African economy. They were getting it at 3.4 or 4%. Investors are charging Kenya a huge premium for perceived risk. And that risk is not about the weather or geography. It's about institutional integrity. If the judiciary is fixing commercial cases through WhatsApp, that 10% premium automatically spikes to junk status. And who pays? Not the corrupt official flying first class. It's you and I. Every time you buy unga, pay for petrol, or try to get a loan, you are paying for the price of institutional decay. Judicial corruption isn't a courtroom issue. It's a household budget issue. The human cost, it's in crumbling the public hospitals when medicine vanishes before it even hits the shelf. It is in the village road contracts that are fully paid for but turn into impassable rivers of mud the moment the rain hit. It is the young professional who tried to start a small business, who won a court case against a politically connected rival, and then watched the judgment gather dust for 3 years because nobody would enforce it. The corruption is not just stealing cash. It is stealing our nation's potential. It is stealing the future of every Kenyan child. My fellow friends, this system is built on something deeper than just greed. It's built on a simple psychological calculation: impunity. When a judge can rule against a mountain of evidence, and a cabinet secretary can openly ignore that ruling, and nothing happens to them, what is the message? The message is that the Constitution is not a sacred document. It is a toilet paper menu of suggestions. And at the moment that belief takes hold, the social contract is completely severed. We start to self-correct in the wrong ways. We stop going to the police. We start taking matters stop taking matters to court. We start seeking out corrupt channels ourselves because they're the only ones that seem to work. We stop being citizens and start being subjects, hoping to survive within a predatory ecosystem. This, my friends, is the cycle of institutional collapse. We saw it with the Mau Mau. We saw it with the land commissions. We saw it after every single election crisis. We never fully purged this poison. We just built a nice fence around the sewage plant and proceeded to call it reform. So, what must Kenya copy from the Madlanga Commission? Number one, we know what works. Pretoria is actually showing us. We must, number one, enforce post-retirement cooling off periods. At least a 5-year ban on judges taking executive appointments. You can be a judge or a political appointee, but you cannot be both in the same half-decade. It removes the incentive to angle for cushy jobs while still wearing the judicial robe. Let's automate case allocation. Let's stop moving these files manually. With the creation of a simple audited randomization script, that would kill judge shopping loophole in a day. My guys, it's a software. I believe we can do this. Third, introduce a judicial integrity stipend. Give judges a taxable 30% stipend. In return, any other income is strictly prohibited. You can be rich or you can be a judge, but you cannot under any circumstances be both. These reforms are the fire extinguishers, but to use them, we need political will to hold the ladder. This brings us to the ultimate deadline, the ultimate opportunity, the 2027 general election. We cannot wait for another crisis commission. We cannot wait for South Africa to clean up our house. The space for substantive, non-partisan reform is right now. We're in the mid-cycle. We can demand legislation that forces Judicial Service Commission to be transparent. We can demand accountability clauses to be tied to the next budget cycle. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, changes if the people we send to Parliament and to the county assemblies are the same political cowards who kept those Maraga task force reports locked in a freaking drawer. The only way to change the system is not by prayer, but is by changing the players. And to change the players, we need to have the power. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the IEBC, has announced that continuous voter registration is resuming this September. This is not a drill. This is not a suggestion. This is the single greatest instrument of change that you as a Kenyan own. You want justice for the dead? Register to vote. You want better schools for your children? My friend, register to vote. You want a contract to be enforced against a powerful politicians? No other way. Register to vote. Don't sit at home. Don't complain on Twitter, or don't assume your voice doesn't matter. Your voice, paired with registration card, is the only weapon you have that can cut through the 608 billion corruption scheme. So go to the IEBC constituency office, go to a Huduma center, take your national ID or your passport. For goddamn, it is free and it is instantaneous, and it is your only insurance policy against total institutional collapse. So if you're 18, if you moved, if you know someone who has never registered, drag them there today. Drag them there today. South Africa is showing us the decay. They're showing us the pain. Now it's up to Kenya to show the world the cure. The reform starts with a click on a pen and change of an entry in a database. It starts with you. So I plead with you, go register, and then we can finally send these corrupt judges and political cowards back to where they belong. On a new Netflix reality show called The Real Housewives of Ethical Violation. It's been your host, DY, and I cannot emphasize this anymore. Please ensure that you've confirmed your details on an IBC website or platform, or ensure that it becomes cool, just like as it was cool to protest. Let's make it cool to register and to vote, because their hope and prayer is that our activism will die on the streets and we will not turn up on election day. So from one voter to the other, please ensure that you adopt at least 5 new voters to get the rot off of this country. Again, God bless Kenya. And I'm your host, DY. Stick around with us, share, like, follow. If you're enjoying what we are producing. Asante sana, and may God bless you guys.